Our speaker is Julie Vargas. She is the Director of Global RFID Market Development for Avery Dennison. So please join me in welcoming Julie.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Julie Vargas, and I lead Global Market Development for Intelligent Labels for the food segment at Avery Dennison. First and foremost, I want to thank Mark and RFID Journal Live for the opportunity to speak with you today. Now, I know that you've heard a lot on the stage already about having the right product at the right place and the right time. We're going to take a look at what that means in an industry that has even higher perishability than fashion. Now, I also know that a lot of you in this room know that this is not the first time that the industry has looked at RFID to solve some of its challenges. But there has been a lot of change, and there's a lot changing every single day, not only from the technology landscape perspective, but also for consumers and what their expectations are. I could do this. Now, to show exactly how much has changed, I need your help. So please, by a show of hands, how many of you have ever bought groceries online to either deliver to your home or pick up from your local supermarket? Okay. How many of you have used a service like Instacart, Shipt, or Favor? Okay, quite a few. And how many of you have had a meal delivered by DoorDash, Grubhub, or Uber Eats? Okay. The industry is changing, and so it's no surprise if I want my clothes and my shoes to buy them the way that I want, delivered the way that I want. We're also going to want the same thing in the food that we eat. If you start with omnichannel grocery, this portion of the industry actually hit $1 trillion last October. And that doesn't even represent 5% penetration across the grocery space in the US. Now, this is fantastic as a consumer, right? But it does pose challenges for the retailers. Think about it. We used to be their labor. Now they have to find people to go and pick and pack those orders. There's also the same expectation that you've heard about on this stage for having the product in stock, and more importantly, making sure that what you take home is accurate. There's nothing worse for customer satisfaction than to pay for something and find out you don't have it when you get home. Now, the new delivery models are also great, right? Think back 5 years, all I had available in my area for delivery was pizza and Chinese food. Now I can literally get anything I want delivered wherever I want. But this also poses new challenges for restaurants and quick service restaurants and fast casual. I used to think that I paid for that service because I had to pay a delivery fee. But the restaurants are also paying a service fee to the tune of 10 to 20%. And as both of these industries are operating on razor-thin margins, these new models, while fantastic for us as consumers, are posing major challenges for profitability. And as consumers, this isn't enough. We want even more convenience. So we're seeing new models pop up around fresh food, both fresh food vending and my favorite term from last year, gas station gourmet. So gone are the days of the rotating wire hot dog ovens, and now we have options like salads and sandwiches and sometimes even sushi at our gas stations and at our drugstores. And so when you look across all of this, there's really this expectation, again, to have what you want, where you want it. And all of that around fresh food causes extreme pressure on the supply chain. It has significant consequences, not only for food safety and food waste, but how they manage delivering all of these channels to make sure that we have what we want on demand. And when we look at food safety in particular, let's talk about that for a moment. How many of you in this room are familiar with a food recall in the past 6 months? Okay, great. How many of you have thrown something away because of a food recall? Okay. So food safety, while we're not going to talk about the actual root of the challenge, we are getting better at identifying when there is a challenge. But what we're not great at doing is eliminating those impacted foods with surgical precision because we don't have the right amount of data. So when you look at that in the space, now you're talking about a recall not only impacting grocery stores, but also impacting restaurants, gas stations, drugstores, so on and so forth. And all of that has dire consequences for food waste. To give you an idea of just how big the food waste challenge is in the industry, there's this great book called Food Foolish. And in the book, they actually illustrate exactly how much food is wasted. So I want you all to take a moment and imagine going to the grocery store and buying 3 big bags of groceries. Now on your way home, take half of one of those bags and throw it out the window. This represents all the food that is wasted during the distribution and harvesting process in the food industry, processing as well. Now once you get home, take the other half of that bag and throw it in the bin, throw it in the garbage. That represents everything that's wasted at the retail level and the consumer level. For those of you that have done the math, about 30% of all food produced for human consumption is wasted. That's a huge opportunity, not only to significantly improve our footprint on this planet, but also a major profitability opportunity across the industry. And all of this has different ways. We can look at this different ways, right? But I don't know of any other industry out there that would allow 30% inefficiency. But it's hard to deal with because there are other impacts happening at the same time. So this industry is also facing labor challenges. Some of that is the additional labor needed for these new models to make things more convenient for you and me. But some of that is actual shortages, not being able to find people to work because of the area that you're in, or rising cost of labor in general. On top of that, there's also a new need for increased traceability. How many of you have heard the word blockchain before? How many of you have heard it or used it in the last 24 hours? Awesome, self-disclosure. All right, great. Well, this one is also interesting. This one didn't happen overnight. So if you go back in time 50 to 60 years ago, you most likely knew where your food came from. You might have even known the person who grew it for you. But chances are you didn't get it from far away. With the complexity in the supply chain, not only across new models, but the distance that our food has to travel, traceability is becoming increasingly important. According to Quasa's study, an average American meal travels 1,500 miles from start to finish to your plate. It touches a lot of people along the way. So as you think about that, it's great from a convenience perspective. We can all make strawberry shortcake in December, but at the same time, it does cause complexity for where and how we deal with the origin of our food, specifically when we start to look at things like food safety and recalls. All of these are causing significant disruption. And when we think about that as a whole, there's a major opportunity for us to take some very small steps to really impact where and how the industry can be safer, more efficient, and more profitable. And when we look at that, we can see that in every single step of the supply chain. Now let me be clear, not all use cases are created equal. And we're taking a look as a team to really understand where and how the value proposition works for different types of technologies. But one thing is clear, is that there's an opportunity, especially now, for technology to have an impact on this industry. One of the other major milestones in that path is around tagging 100% of items. So when you look at that supply chain, there's really 3 big opportunities. One of them is around inventory. We've talked about that on the stage. One of them is around convenience, so the new models of grab and go and really understanding how to remove labor from the process. And the other is around the traceability aspect. But to do that, you have to be able to tag all of your items. We've spent a lot of time overcoming some of the challenges that RF faces for tagging every single thing. Everyone in this room knows that liquid and metal don't play well with radio frequency, so we have options there, and it's great. We're getting the right read rates, the right solution for the right product, but we'll continue to innovate here, leveraging our roots and our expertise in material science to integrate into core packaging as well. And the last one that's super critical, full disclosure, I have not tested this, and I highly recommend that you don't try this at home, but I have seen someone else test it, and please take my word that when you put an RFID inlay into the microwave, it will catch on fire. So this was a huge hurdle to overcome, specifically for the ready-to-eat meal space and convenience. Now that you can tag 100% of things, this actually doesn't look any different from what you've seen in many of these RFID journals, right? Track and trace, the ability to capture data at every single step in the supply chain. But the reason why this is different for us today than it was a few years ago is the increasing opportunity that we're seeing to leverage those data sets for new digital functionality. Think about artificial intelligence, specifically for the food segment, predictive analytics, and, as we've already discussed, blockchain. So as that data becomes increasingly valuable, we'll continue to see where and how technologies like RFID and other sensor technologies can truly begin to tackle the major inefficiencies that we're seeing across the food supply chain. Now, to give you some more context about what's happening in that digital space, I'd like to invite to the stage Sowmya from IBM. And while he's joining me, please take a look at this video.
Today, there are more sensors on our planet than people. We're putting AI into everything, and everything into the cloud. It's all so smart, but how do you work with it? Ask this farmer. He's using satellite data to help increase crop yields. That's smart for the food we eat. At this port, supply chains are becoming more transparent with blockchain. That's smart for millions of shipments. In this lab, researchers are working with Watson to help them find new treatments. That's smart for medicine. At this bank, the world's most encrypted mainframe is helping prevent cybercrime. That's smart for everyone. And in Africa, IoT sensors and the IBM cloud are protecting endangered animals. That's smart for rhinos. Yeah, rhinos. Because smart only really matters when we put it to work. Not just for a few of us, but for all of us. Let's put smart to work.
Okay. Please join me in welcoming Sowmya Varadarajan to the stage from IBM. Thanks, Sowmya.
Hey.
All right, well, thanks for joining us. So let's start with that, putting smart to work. Talk to me about IBM and digital transformation.
So what's happened, and a big part of your speech as well, fundamentally the way consumers are interacting with businesses are changing, right? What we find is enterprises have to do three things to really be relevant, right? They have to engage their consumers in a very compelling way, right? You talked about ordering groceries online. It's even beyond just ordering a bag of grocery online. It's ordering a meal online that, and curating that for your specific dietary needs and getting that shipped to you so that you can still have that gourmet meal made at, like people like Blue Apron, what they're doing.
Right.
Next is creating a new focus for the business. So what people are doing, enterprises are doing, are creating a new focus. You talked about the gas stations, not the rotating hot dogs anymore, right? You go in, it's a destination for gourmet salads and good coffee, not just a lot of coffee, right? So that's number two. But in order to do the first two things, they have to create new skills. They really have to look into their organizations, create their new skills, and create that change management and the organizational evolution that they need to do, like some of the presenters that talked earlier to make those things, right? So we at IBM, we see different enterprises are along this continuum, but the incumbents who have a lot of the data, right, have the right. And now they have, if they can make that data actionable, they can really take a bigger, be a bigger force in the market rather than being attacked by the incumbents all the time, right? So we all know 80% of the data is dark. They have a ton of data that's not all structured. It's, it's all over the place. Some of it is just knowledge that resides in the enterprise. How do you activate all of that?
Right.
So.
Great. And I think that's the big question mark. Specifically back to food, we've been involved in some disruption together in the food space. Let's talk a little bit about what that means for that industry that typically has a very unique but inefficient operating model.
That's right. So when we look at food, and I think the video touched on a couple of examples, we are working with farmers, to help their crop yield. But more holistically, if we take a step back, we're looking at farm to fork, right? And we're looking from a consumer angle backwards and saying like, hey, how can I create a very compelling experience for the consumer? Know where this pork came from, know where this mango came from, know where this coffee bean came from, right? Being able to interact with that, and beyond just interacting and finding the provenance of the product, we are also tying it back to doing something for your fellow human. Being able to not just tip your barista saying like, hey, here's $1 for the coffee, being able to do something for the community where the coffee bean came from, right? So now we're able to, changed the economy. Now you're able to like really connect commerce from where you are here in Arizona all the way back to a farm, in Costa Rica or, other places. We're creating unparalleled visibility across the supply chain. So we've taken the hurdle out of how do you digitize information and who has the right to put information onto the supply chain and how is that shared. With technologies like blockchain, we are completely democratizing that so that people, even at the very end, the farmer can put with his phone the shipment notice, or here's what the product that's been put on the pallet, being able to upload that. So we are creating unparalleled visibility that leads to, at the end of the day, a level of provenance, which we talked about, visibility and trust in the entire supply chain. So you get better visibility to your inventory levels, a better visibility to your demand signal, so you can optimize your entire supply chain.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we've looked at that, right? We mentioned also that not all use cases are created equal across the entire supply chain. Can you talk a bit about some of the work that you've done in this space already?
I think maybe we should roll the video, and then we can talk a little bit more about that.
Sounds great.
Nothing beats the taste of a fresh, juicy hamburger. But what does fresh really mean? And how can customers be confident that the burgers they're eating are truly fresh? It all begins here, where the patties are made, boxed, shipped, and distributed along a long, complex supply chain. Today, Golden State Foods is showing how to ensure its patties' freshness and how the process can serve as a model for transforming the entire food system.
Golden State Foods is a provider of goods and services to various quick service restaurants. We have a manufacturing facility in Opelika, Alabama, and we produce over 160 million pounds of beef products every year.
This is how Golden State Foods and IBM are using blockchain, radio frequency identification, and the Internet of Things to make customers more confident in the food they eat. This is the extra mile.
So this is a big piece of the work that I've been personally involved in the last couple of years, where what we have done is created visibility from the plant, from the combo bins that come in with, this big meat combo bins that come into the plant. And when it's issued to production, tracking that, being able to see what the plant, what lines this meat is going through, being able to track the temperature through all of that, being able to then track the cases right after production, out of manufacturing into DC, having a good view of stock rotations in the DC and into the restaurants, right? So as more and more of the food supply chain goes from frozen to fresh, which is what people want, right? Shelf life becomes important, stock rotation becomes important, backroom inventory management becomes a huge issue. So what we have done is created this visibility working with people like Golden State Foods, and of course, Avery has been part of that project as well.
Okay, great. So let's talk about that connection between the physical product and the digital functionality. Where and how do you see those two playing together as transformation continues to grow?
Today, a lot of the digital identity comes very late in the process, right? I think to really see the benefits of this, and it's only one dimension, right, really, because you get the identity of the product far down the supply chain, and you get a very specific identity of the product, right? But you miss a lot of the information that you could potentially get, and the value that others in the supply chain can possibly realize if you continue to push up the supply chain and you continue to look and be able to get that identity associated, not just with the product, but along the process, okay, right? So, there is a lot of value we can get from that, And also it's about not just, it's about identity and other attributes of the identity. Like if you can validate the authenticity of something, right? How authentic is this product based on the identity you see, and if it can tell you some things about that product, meaning like this is a fresh product, this is a frozen product, or this is you know, a metal product, you know, being able to get those kind of attributes would be very, very helpful.
Okay, great. And then last question, so how can this room and what do you think we should all be doing to prepare better for the digital transformation happening in our segment?
Sure, you know, when I think back, you know, I think everybody, the industry folks that are here, can really probably say like, hey, we have done tons of pilots. Yeah. We have proved our pilots have been successful with the criteria that have been established, you know, with our clients, right? But yet, how come it's not wildfire? It's not gangbusters? You know, I even continue to ask, you know. I think BAE said like, you know, hey, they tried it 2 times. This is the latest version of trying RFID, and they've been successful, which is great, right? We want to see more of that, right? But to me, it's really one, going upstream and unlocking value beyond the pilot at the end and doing something, you know, just at the point of consumption or point of you know, where it becomes a very big inventory management issue, but looking at the entire supply chain holistically, going as far back, being able to see, create that visibility. So how do we work to do that? How do we create a value proposition that shows here's the value all the way across the supply chain? It's not all about just inventory management, even though that's a very big piece of it because supply chains are fully stocked. You know, so much inventory is just stocked and pushed in without a good understanding of the demand signal, right? So it's really creating that, you know, value proposition for each step of the way, right? And then the other thing I see is it's not one technology, right? You know, it's not just RFID. Because we have a lot of monolith solutions that do one thing really well. What we find working with our clients, it's a combination of things. It's really correlating multiple inputs, you know, with Internet of Things, sensors, RFID, and data, you know, point of sale data, it's, you know, other supply chain data, combining all of that and creating a holistic view and building an application that's, you know, that can that the business can run on, right? So that's really what we, you know, playing together. What does that mean? That means, you know, playing together, being able to share attributes about different things that we work together, being able to share that and say like, okay, I can now show this value to you, and because of that, I'm able to get this value in return. Mm-hmm. You know, we need to make that obvious.
Right. No, that makes sense. And as we saw, you know, the demand is becoming increasingly complex to service, and so there's a real opportunity to really make sure that we're optimizing supply and distribution to drive a more sustainable and intelligent world. Yeah. Great.
Well, and I would just want to say, like, why IBM? Why are we here, right? You know, IBM has reinvented ourselves in this digital trend. We've been on the digital journey ourselves, right? We've gone from a hardware company to now cloud, AI, analytics, and cybersecurity and services. Just in the last year, you know, over 50% of our revenues are coming from some of these emerging areas, right? When you look at cloud, AI, cybersecurity, and analytics. So blockchain, AI, I mean, I say these things and people can be skeptical and say like, hey, are these like just buzzwords? How real is this in the marketplace? You know, we've done around 20,000 AI, you know, engagements across the world, you know, with around 20 clients, or 20 countries or more. We've done, you know, close to 500 client engagements on blockchain, right? We have 85 blockchain networks that we are actively working on. We've done investments in blockchain with Maersk, with global trade. How do we, you know, how do we make global trade, you know, more transparent, visible, and of course, things that go on that. Could be food, could be, you know, other commodity electronics, whatever those items are. You know, global trade we've done a lot with. We've done big with, you know, big for visibility with big box stores.
Right.
Right. So, you know, IBM is transformed. It's really, we are seeing the inflection point in the marketplace for these type of technologies, right? And enterprises, in the first act of cloud has moved like about 20% of their business onto cloud on the easy workloads that they can transition.
Right.
But it's really about the 80% now. It's really the tougher pieces and how can they get there. It's with AI, it's with cognitive technologies, it's with analytics, it's with cloud.
It's a really exciting time, and it's a great start to the journey. And I think what's really interesting is to see how fast it's accelerating and where and how companies that are really working in the physical sensor space are starting to augment a lot of those opportunities in the digital space as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Sowmya. With that, I'd like to invite Mark out to take your questions and answers. We'll give you the answers. You just provide the questions.
Okay. Got time for some questions? Raise your hand. We'll run a mic down. We got one right here. Can we get a mic? Is there a mic somewhere? Okay, it's just coming. So while we're waiting, I have to say that microwave tag is the coolest thing. That is really innovative.
Legal told me to say, please don't try that at home.
Yeah, I'll make sure I don't do that. Yeah. Golden State's a big producer of other products too, produce and things like that. So I'm curious, two questions really. Are they looking at doing other, tagging other areas of their supply chain for other products? And number two, what did their partners do, the folks they buy the bulk product from? Are they involved in this, or was this all internal?
Sure. I can answer both your questions the best I can. For number one, I'm not Golden State Foods. I don't want to talk about their business strategy. What we are doing is, what I can talk about is the pilot that we did. It was focused on fresh beef. It was a very focused effort to show the value from the manufacturer, because it's their plant and they had the distribution center. So through the distribution center into the restaurant, and to see what that visibility can give, right? And how we can optimize that portion of it. Clearly they are innovating. Like when I said in the beginning of my speech, in a digitally disruptive environment, companies have to create compelling experiences, create a new focus for their business. As Golden State Food is going and being innovative, they want to think big, act fast. So this is the type of stuff that they're doing. I can't really 100% say what they will do beyond.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, not specific to Golden State Food, but in general, from a where do you start perspective, there is an opportunity with perishable goods to also look at how you optimize them before expiry. And so that is typically where we're seeing most of the movement in the industry today. Again, not specific to GSF.
Okay. Another question?
Sorry, there was a second part.
Oh, sorry.
Partnerships.
Yeah. So clearly, and this is one of my comments I try to address also in my Q&A with Julie. There are a lot of pilots happening, right? This is a pilot environment. This is not a full production rollout environment. But clearly, everybody understands the need for more players going upstream and downstream, right? So there were a set of people, working on this pilot, but it's not going to be limited to that,
Okay, do we have another question? I have a question. Do customers, potential customers, see the growing value that as you get more data from RFID and other sensors and GPS data, whatever, that the value is going to constantly increase as you have more data? You'll be able to apply data analytics, eventually apply AI. Is that an ongoing education? Do people get it?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely it is, right? I think, I will go back to even what BAE said, right? They found these tools were going all over the place. They're like, hey, that data showed them that, right? So most of the pilots that we are working on, most of the clients we are working on these advanced AI and, analytics engagements, we are able to show them value, not only in where we started and we said, here's the focus and let's prove out this value. We find all these adjacent areas where they had no idea that how things were going, how things were functioning, and we were able to show all of that. And so the analytics, being able to, that's why it's really good to think through and say, what is the information architecture you need, right? And what are the data sources you need to curate, both inside from your own company and external data sources, to be able to create a bigger, broader picture of your business. Right.
And it's not a new story, right? I mean, I think ultimately, when you take a look at really what processes you're implementing and identify where the strong value is, both to, I mean, this is an industry in a lot of places that's still using clipboard and pens, right? So there is a massive opportunity for automation, and when you start to dig into the value of that, right, it becomes increasingly valuable with more data.
The other thing is the food industry has very, very thin margins. Mm-hmm. So does that make it harder to do these projects, or does it make it even more essential to maximize the value?
The answer is yes. Go ahead.
Well, so again, going back to the very first question that Julie asked me, right? The digital disruption is happening, right? Status quo is not a viable answer, right? Mm-hmm. So the ankle biters are coming, you know, it's just happening. So the incumbents have to do something, right? So to do that, they need to figure out, and again, this goes to the ROI and the business case value. Nobody does these projects without that, but really we need to hold ourselves to say, how is that work on scale? How does it not just work for this POC, right? And show that business case and the value all the way through. But it is something that is happening.
Okay, great.
And I'll go back to the one that I'm very passionate about, which is food waste. And so you think about, yes, they're razor thin margins, but there is a chunk of their margin that they're giving up that they're literally throwing in the garbage. Sure. And so when you start to look at how you optimize that, it solves two problems.
Okay. Please join me in thanking our speakers. Great job. Really appreciate it.